Welcome to the Final Boss Podcast. It is Sitting Down Sundays edition of the Final Boss Podcast. And man, I got a great show for you tonight. I have a great show for you tonight, man. Before we get started, let's say a great thank you to all of you who already have purchased Go Time 2, All Aboard the Fired Up Train, right? Everyone that purchased Go Time 2, All Aboard the Fired Up Train, my new book, it dropped later on this week. I'm sorry. It dropped on Thursday. If you hadn't gotten, go get it. The link is below. The link is below, man. Make sure. Peace. What's going on, Ray? I see you. Thank you for joining us. Look, go get Go Time 2, man. Look, it's the second book of the series. Please go get it. Man, you won't be disappointed. I'm telling you, you will not be disappointed. Make sure if you haven't already, get Go Time 1 while you're at it, right? Get both of them, man. Get both books while you are at it. And then you will not be disappointed. I guarantee it. I guarantee you won't be disappointed, right? So tonight I got a great show for you. We're gonna get into the show in a few minutes, right? Now that I got the book out the way. Look, we have 200 and what episode is this? 292 episodes. We are 8 episodes out from the season 5, which is the harvest. Season 5 is the harvest, is around the corner. I'm super excited about that, man. It'll be here before you know it. It'll be here before you know it. Of course, I'll probably take a week or two break before we get established back into the new season, because that's what I like to do, man. We like to break the monotony and to get things back rolling. But season 5, the harvest is around the corner, and I am excited about it, man. Look, you have no idea, right? A lot of big things are coming. Lots, plural, of big things coming. So, season 5, the harvest. Go Time 2 just dropped. Later on this year, Go Time 3 would be dropping, right? Then you have the complete trilogy. So make sure you get books 1 and 2, right? Hey, if you want, you have questions, concerns, or if you like to be on the show, shoot us an email at info@thefinalbosspodcast.com. That's info@thefinalbosspodcast.com. This is Sitting Down Sundays. This is season 4, the Rebirth Arc 5 Declaration, episode number 292. Man, we get ready to get into it. What am I missing? Okay, got the book. Let's see. Email. What up? Oh, yes. 292 episodes, and if you need to catch up, go check out our website at www.thefinalbosspodcast.com. That's www.thefinalbosspodcast.com to check out all of our episodes. Hey, Tiny, I see you. Thank you for joining us. Yes, info at the final. No, it's you're missing the podcast part. So it's info at final boss. Wait a minute. You know what? Let me type it in real quick. Technology, baby. Let me type it in real quick for you. Okay. Right? Too easy. Info. Oh, man. INFO. There we go. Info at thefinalbosspodcast.com. Email. Boom. There it is. Right? There it is. So we get ready to get into it, man. I'm going to go ahead and let's see. What do I need to do? I think I got everything out. So, whew, yes. Now, tonight's episode. Tonight we're going to be talking about something, right? We continue the conversation of the declaration, because this is the declaration arc, and as we're closing out the declaration, we had parts 1, part 2 of the declaration, but now we're going to put a little spin on it, right? So this part, we're going to be talking about the room you outgrew that you was declared in, right? Because it's about time for you to start thinking ahead. Let's get rid of the banners. The banners are out of here, right? The room you declared in, you've outgrown. If you haven't, you should have. And that's what we're going to be talking about, right? So I want you to listen to this, right? There's a specific kind of quiet that shows up in the room that you used to feel completely at home in, right? You know what rooms I'm talking about. And it's the silence from the outside. It's the silence from you, right? You're sitting in the same chair, same people around the same table, right? Same conversations that used to fuel you a week ago or some time ago, and now you're feeling that silence. And somewhere in the middle of it all, without deciding for you to go quiet, you're thinking of it, right? Not because you're upset, not because anything happened, but because the room stopped fitting and your body knew it before your mind caught up, right? You're starting to outgrow that room, right? Nobody prepares you for this part of growth. They prepare you for the resistance you'll face from the people who doubted you. They prepare you for the haters, the critics, the folks who never believed in you the first place, right? And listen, I'm going to tell you, here's the funny part. Up personal, right? You know, I got to bring it home and got to bring it personal. There are people out there that probably bought my book because they wanted to see either how bad it was or if I was even capable. Listen, it happens and I get it. That's why we're here, right? And that's the part nobody sits you down and says the harder loss isn't going to be the people who never believed in you. It's going to be the room that did believe in you, right? The people who did believe in you, but still doubted you, man, right? Why are you talking about Jake Paul? Hey, that's hilarious. Hey, listen, Cowboy. Hey, bro, go ahead, man. That's funny. Oh man, that is funny. You got me on the fired up train, man. That is funny. Look, the room that clapped for you first, man. That's what we're talking about. The room that held space for the old declaration and doesn't quite know what to do now that you have outgrown those walls and you've reached a level of success. You've reached a certain pinnacle, and they're sitting back like wondering, like, man, what happened? Right? Yes, that's right. Well, Final Boss family, welcome to Sit Down Sundays. I am the Final Boss. This is episode number 292, and this is about the truth, right? The truth in this arc, and we haven't touched on this yet, right? We've talked this entire season about opening your mouth and declaring what you're becoming. We haven't talked about what happens to the room you were standing in when you said it, right? Because that room doesn't automatically grow with you. Sometimes it can't, sometimes it won't, right? And sometimes the most sovereign thing you'll ever do is walk out of a room that loved the old you. So the new you has somewhere to actually live, right? We're talking about growth, man. We're talking about growth, right? Listen, that's what we're talking about. And this is not a betrayal conversation. This right here is I need you to hear this early conversation, right? Because guilt would try to hijack the entire episode before we even get into the real content. I know. I saw the fight, man. I saw it. It was a good fight. It was a good fight. Kind of, right? And I need you to understand that early, right? The guilt part, right? This is the architecture conversation. Rooms are built to a size. People are built to a season. Growth is not loyalty to a floor plan. Growth is what happens when you stop apologizing for needing more square footage than the room you started in was ever built for, right? Listen, we're 8 episodes out from season 5, The Harvest. And I promise you, this brand is sitting in right now is not the room it's going to be standing in when the door opens to the harvest. It's not going to be the same, right? Some of what got us here is not coming with us. That's not disrespect to the past. That's just what the harvest season actually requires. Now, we're going to really get into it. Let's talk about the rooms you've outgrown and the ones you haven't had the courage to leave yet, right? And I'm not doing this episode from a distance, right? I've stood in that specific quiet room more times than I like admitting. In rooms full of people who love me, watching me own what I say, right? And what I say, I watch those rooms get smaller, so nobody at the table will have to fill the size of what I actually was building. That's a strange thing, really. It really is kind of strange, right? Yes, God is going to save us all, brother. Yes, peace and love. Absolutely. It is a strange thing, right? It's a strange kind of dishonesty. And it kind of looks like kindness from the outside, and it feels like slow suffocation from the inside. If you've ever caught yourself doing that, downgrading your own declaration mid-sentence because you clocked the room and the room wasn't ready for the full version, you already know exactly the feeling of what I'm talking about. That's what we're going to be talking about this whole entire episode. Let's get into it, man. This is the Find the Boss podcast. This is Sitting Down Sundays, man. Listen, man. Listen. Listen. Right? Look. Let's set the table. Let's set the table before we go any further, right? We're talking about that long Thanksgiving table, right? And everybody's sitting at the chair and everybody's having family conversations, man. We're talking about that type of table. They want me to cut the turkey, but I don't want to cut the turkey type of table, right? Because this episode is going to ask something of the people who've been here since day one in the beginning. And I want you to be oriented first, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? If you didn't know, this is one of 5 shows that run weekly, right? This is Find the Boss podcast. We run 5 days a week live. We got Motivation Mondays that opens up the week with the gut check. We got Tech Tuesdays with my brother, the sensei, right? Big Mike. And then where we're tracking the technology, right? Technology and power and actually where everything is going and where it's heading. Then on Merger Wednesdays is my doctoral engine feeding directly to the Merge book series. And then there's special guest Thursdays, which brings voices into the room that aren't mine. And on Sundays, right here, sitting down, is where we slow everything down. There's no guests, there's no co-hosts, and just the two of us, you and I, and whatever needs saying before the week resets, right? Look, I told you earlier, we're in season 4 the Rebirth, Art 5, the Declaration. We're running. This declaration was running and it started from 271 and it's going to continue to episode number 299. This arc has asked you to say things out loud that you used to keep locked into your chest. We've covered what it costs to keep a promise you made in public. We've covered the discipline of declaration. We covered the committee's permission. We've covered reading the field before you commit to play. And tonight, episode number 292, we're covering something none of these episodes touched on directly, and what happens to the room around you once the declaration is actually out, right? Hey, man, you got jokes, bro. Cold Boy, man. Shout out to Cold Boy, man. He's bringing the jokes tonight, man. Let me tell you. Listen. Here's what nobody's going to tell you, right? Because they hype up moments of declaration, right? The applause you get in the first room is real, right? But the room was built for the version of you that existed the second before you spoke. The moment the words left your mouth, you started growing past the blueprint the room was drawn into, right? And most people don't notice the gap until it's already wide enough to feel like abandonment on one side and suffocation on the other. And tonight we're going to look at the gap directly instead of pretending it isn't there. This is the art that has been, that's never been gentle, right? Never been gentle. And tonight, it isn't going to break that pattern. We're going to keep going, right? We've been going in this art since 271 through the exact moment, building your capacity to declare things out loud without waiting for a committee's approval. That work matters and it stands, right? But declaration doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists inside relationships, inside communities, inside rooms full of people who each have their own relationship to the person you used to be. And tonight we're going to be finishing that thought that we started with in the beginning, right? And we're not going to be undoing it, right? We're not undoing it. Nah, he going to lose that fight, bro. He can't fight me. He going to lose that fight. Trust me, right? But look, before we move into the body of the episode, I want to leave you with something to sit the whole way through. Now, I want you to sit on this. Usually, the brass tacks is in the beginning of the segment, right? I'm putting it here for good reason. So here's tonight's brass tacks. Here's the brass tacks, right? Listen. A room built for who you were will always feel crowded by who you're becoming. This is not the room's fault. It is proof that you grew, right? Now, hold on to that. Hold on to that. Because the next few minutes, right, I'm going to ask you to look honestly at which rooms in your life were built for old blueprints and whether you had the courage yet to admit it out loud. I want you tracking things, right? And one thing in particular, right, as we move through tonight's episode, because every minute from here forward speaks to a different part of how you handle this gap. The strangest part, right? The strangest part, the warrior part, the motivator part, the leveled up part of you. By the time we close this out, you should have a full picture, not just a feeling of which rooms in your life actually need your attention this week, right? So let's get into it. So now I ain't fighting Tyson, bro. I'll fight Jake Paul. I'm not fighting Tyson. You crazy. I'm not fighting him. I don't care how old he is. I was just watching a video of him sparring the other day. Nah, I'm not getting in the ring with him. That's a madman. That's insane. Now, let's start with the architecture, because most people skip straight to the emotion and miss the mechanism underneath it, right? To my smarts, my motivators, my warriors, my final bosses, this is for all of you, right? I want you to look at your room, a room, any room, a friend, a group, a family dynamic, a business partnership, a community you built your identity around. Get constructed around a specific version of you, right? The you that existed when the relationship formed, the you that existed when the business started, the you that existed when the declaration was first made, the rooms, walls, all of the rebar, the paint, the decoration, it's all unspoken rules, right? It's uncomfortable silences, it's inside jokes. And all of it gets calibrated to fit the specific size of the version of the person who you become. Nobody sits down and engineers this on purpose, right? It just happens the way water finds the shape of whatever container it's in, right? And here's the part almost nobody accounts for, right? Because growth doesn't ask the room's permission before it happens. You grow and you outgrow rooms, right? Like a kid going from a twin to a bunk to whatever size bed they have as adults, right? Same thing. You didn't get the memo that says, before expanding, please notify all existing relationships so they can renovate accordingly. Growth just happens in the middle of the night, right? And it happens in the quiet, right? In the discipline moments when nobody sees it, right? In the version of you that shows up to do the work when the room isn't even watching. And then one day you walk back out into the room and that exact same room, is something about it feels different. You say to yourself, man, this room was small. I really outgrew this room, right? No, I'm independent to answer your question. I'm independent, right? I don't believe in the binary system. I'm independent. Not because the room changed, because you did. And the room is still built to old blueprints. But I am a 2A guy. Trust and believe. I believe in my 2A. I'm proud. I'm proud of service. I served in the military for 17 years. I worked in DOD for 23. So, yeah. But listen, that old blueprint, right? And this is where most people make the mistake that keeps them small for years. They feel the mismatch, the tightness, the sense of something doesn't fit anymore. And instead of naming it as growth and they name it as ingratitude, right? Ingratitude. Then they tell themselves they're being disloyal for noticing the room got small. They shrink themselves back to fit inside the space rather than admit the space needs to change or they need to leave it. That shrinking feels like humility. It actually is quite the quiet death, I should say, of everything you've been building towards, right? So stop making yourself small. Stop shrinking, right? Stop shrinking, people, right? Look. And I want to be precise about this, right? I want to be precise about what I'm about to say. And look, I'm not telling you every uncomfortable room is a room you should abandon. No, that's not what I'm saying. Because discomfort alone isn't proof of anything. What I am telling you is that a specific kind of discomfort, the kind where you feel yourself getting smaller just to keep the peace. That's the room I'm talking about, right? Where you catch yourself editing your own declarations down to a size that won't even threaten anybody in the room. That specific discomfort is diagnostic. It's telling you the room was built for a version of you that no longer exists. And I want to add one more layer before we continue, right? Because this gets misunderstood constantly, right? Because a room, right? A room being built to an old size does not make the room worthless. And it doesn't make the people in the room wrong who are in it, right? Who are existing in that size, right? A starter apartment, right? A lot of people start with efficiencies, right? Let's talk about efficiencies, right? It's not a bad apartment, right? Because it gives you a roof over your head, right? Because a family of 6 eventually outgrows it, right? It was exactly the right size for exactly the right season when it was just you, when you were just leaving from under your parents' roof and not purchasing, but renting something of your own, right? Listen, the mistake isn't even having lived there, right? It's all growth. The mistake is refusing to move once the family has genuinely outgrown their square footage, right? You can't have, well, some people do, but you should, but they do, right? 6 people in inefficiency, it happens, right? But look, let me move on. Calling the refusal loyalty instead of what it actually is, which is fear wearing loyalty's clothing, right? So here's where we start, right? I'm not fighting Mike Tyson, bro. Not doing it. Think of one room in your life right now. Look, cold boy, listen. You go. You get in the ring and go fight, right? Think of the room you're in right now in your life, right? And where you've been quietly editing yourself down to keep from outgrowing. Hey, Cole, drop that room in the chat right now, man. Drop that room in the chat. But look, I don't want you to fix it yet. Just drop the name of it. Drop the name of the room, right? Because we're going to name it further on as we continue. So go ahead and drop that name. And to my smarts, I need you to bring the same rigor to the conversation that you bring everything else, because this is exactly the kind of problem your mind was built to solve. If you're willing to point it at yourself instead of just the business plan, then drop it, right? Yeah, just drop it, right? So here's the audit I need you to run, right? Most of you already know how to evaluate whether a strategy still fits current conditions, right? Sit with that. You do it constantly. You do it at work. You do it in your investments. You do it in your planning. You almost never run the same audit on your relationships and your rooms because it feels colder to apply the kind of analysis to people you love. I understand the resistance you're feeling. I'm asking you to override it anyway because avoiding the audit doesn't protect the relationship. It just delays the reckoning and makes it more painful when it finally happens, right? The audit is simple. So pay attention. Listen, right? Even if the answers aren't, pay attention. For every major room in your life, cold boy, listen, I need you to write this down. Ask 3 questions. Does this room still know the current version of me or only the version that existed when the room was built, right? Does this room have capacity to grow alongside what I'm currently building, or is it structurally maxed out as a size I've already passed, right? Think about it. And when I bring my current declaration to the room and I met them with genuine engagement, or is it a kind of polite tolerance that quietly asks me to shrink the topic back down to something smaller and safer, right? Those are the questions, right? And here's where my smarts get stuck. I know you do. I know you do. I've had these conversations with you guys. I know you do, right? And this is when the smarts get stuck, right? Listen, and I need to name it directly, right? You'll run this audit intellectually and get an honest answer, and then you'll talk yourself out of acting on it, because acting on it looks irrational to people who don't have access to the data you're working from. Nobody else can see the growth happening in you the way you can from the outside. Walking away from a room that's been loyal to you for years looks ungrateful, even reckless, right? But from the inside, staying in a room that's structurally incapable of holding what you're becoming is the actual reckless choice. You're just the only one with the information to see it that way, right? Now, look, strategy, right? Strategy without the willingness to act on strategy's conclusion isn't strategy. It's an expensive form of avoidance dressed up in spreadsheets, right? My smarts know how to build the audit. The real test this week is whether you're willing to let the audit answer, the real answer from the audit, cost you a room you're comfortable in, even when nobody around you can see it yet, why the room stopped fitting, right? Okay, got you. All right. Thanks for sharing, right? And one more thing. Look, one more thing for my analytical mind specifically, right? Don't confuse a room that needs updating with a room that needs abandoning. Two different things, right? The audit has to be able to produce both answers if it's honest. Some rooms follow the audit not because they're structurally incapable of growth, but because nobody has ever brought the current data into them, right? You've been running the analysis privately and presenting the old, smaller version of yourself in the room out of habit before you file a room under being maxed out, right? Make sure you've actually tested it with your full current declaration, not the edited version you've been defaulting to for years of pure muscle memory, right? Now, treat this like any other flawed data set, right? Garbage in, garbage out, right? Applies here just as much as it applies anywhere else you'll run analysis. And if the input has been shrunken, or it's a shrunken version of you, and you've been doing it for years, then the audit's conclusion about the room's capacity is worthless until you correct the input first, right? Now, who got questions? Oh, bro, I don't know the exact year. It was shoot, man. I don't have my Google in front of me, but you know, the information's out there. Google's your friend, right? Let me tell you. I know. Let me tell you, right? Let me show you the rooms I've had to outgrow. Because this is the cost confession. You know, we got to have the cost confession, right? Because I'm not going to ask you to do something on this show, because I never do. This is the Fighter Boss podcast, and I never ask you guys to do something that I'm not willing to do myself, right? Or I haven't already done myself more than once at a real cost, right? So, you know, I spent the amount of time I did at an agency that I outgrew, and I built a room around that, and it became safe. A whole professional identity, a rhythm, a network of people who knew exactly who I was inside that structure, right? I was a branch chief, right? And that wasn't just a title to be thrown around. I've been in those rooms. I was in the room, right? And it was there for over 2 decades. And it had its own language. It had its own culture. It had its own version of me that everyone in it recognized instantly. When I walked away, right, I wasn't just leaving. I was leaving a room that had taken 2 decades of my time to build, full of people who genuinely knew and respected a version of me that existed inside those very walls. That room didn't do anything wrong, right? I want to be clear about that. It didn't do anything wrong. But because this isn't a story about the bad room, this is a story about a room that was sized perfectly for who I was for over 2 decades and simply couldn't stretch to hold what I was declaring next, right? What I was declaring next was Chief Executive Officer, right? Founder, author, doctoral candidate, right? Podcast host. Man, you name it. All those titles, right? And none of that fit inside the room that was built for that particular vision, right? Not because the room failed me, but because I had genuinely outgrown those dimensions. Now, the harder version of this course showed up socially, not professionally, right? Because some of the people I came up with in uniform, in a federal career, in those circles that shaped me in my 20s and 30s didn't grow at the same pace in the same direction. I didn't say that was superiority, right? Growth isn't a competition. There's no version of this where I look down on anyone's path. Your path is your path, right? I say it because the honest truth in some of those relationships got quieter over the years, not from conflict, but from distance that neither of us chose and neither of us knew how to name out loud. And that's the real loss, right? And I still feel it, right? Building SAT DigiNet, finishing my MBA, grinding toward my PhD in AI Foundation ethical considerations and philosophy of artificial intelligence, and writing a bestseller. None of that happened without leaving some rooms behind that I actually and genuinely valued. And here's the confession. I still catch myself shrinking a declaration down when I'm back in an old room, an old friend group, a family gathering, out of some instinct to not make anyone feel like I think I'm bigger than the room right now. That instinct is honest, is human, right? And it is also exactly the trap the whole episode is warning you about. I'm not exempt from this. I'm just further along and learning to notice it happening in real time. And I do it, and I do it a lot, right? Not, what can I say? I do it, all right? I do it. That's the constant factor, right? So I'm admitting it, right? And I add one more layer to the confession because I think it matters more than the resume version of the story. Because earning, I should say, some of you may know, I was in school to become a pilot too. I am. I was becoming a pilot, right? In the middle of all that, I was doing all these other things, right? And I was in another room that I had to build from, right? With a entirely new set of people who only ever knew me as a student, right? In the cockpit, not as the fighter boss, not as Turbo CDO or any of that stuff, not as combat veteran, right? Or any of those other titles. They didn't even know I was in school trying to finish my master's. They didn't know any of that stuff, right? But that room forced humility back into my life at a point where it would have been easy to stop being a beginner of anything. Every room you build fresh at whatever stage of life keeps you honest about how much you still don't know. So let's practice humility, right? Let's practice humility, right? So, to my fighter bosses, here's a picture you already understand from the games that gave the podcast its name anyway, right? Every player starts in a starter's guild, right? I'm talking gaming now, Cold Boy. I know you're a gamer. Let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about it. A starter zone, a starter crew of people fighting at roughly the same level, right? Like GTA fans, all you guys, you know all about that, right? GTA 6 is about to drop, supposedly, right? That guild essentially is early. You learn mechanics together, you grind together, you celebrate the first real wins together, and there's a bond in this shared beginning that nothing else quite replicates it. To my Destiny fans, man, my heart goes out to you guys. I am part of the Destiny family, and look, I've been playing Destiny for years, and I'm sad to see it go, man, but hey, this is what it is. This is business, right? But every guild has a level range is actually built for. And if you keep leveling while your starter guild plateaus, a gap opens that no amount of loyalty closes on its own, right? And here's what the game doesn't warn you about, and life definitely doesn't either, right? You see the similarities, the metaphor, right? The moment you outlevel your starting guild is at a moment where the guild did anything wrong. It didn't do anything wrong. They're still fighting the content that used to be hard for both of you. You're the one who kept grinding past it. And now every raid you queue for is scaled to a difficulty that you can't survive. And every raid that they queue for is trivial content that no longer teaches you anything. You're technically still in the same guild tag. You're functionally playing two different games. And this is exactly what happens with the crews, communities, and inner circles that got us all started in the, from the jump, right? The friend group, the early hustle years, their first business partners from the scrappy startup phase, right? The community that showed up for your first declarations before anyone else could believe in them, right? All essential, all real, and all potentially sized for a level you've already passed. Final bosses, don't get me to pretend that this tension doesn't exist just because the guild was good to us once, right? Once was real, once isn't a lifetime contract. And here's the move, right? The move here isn't villain behavior. And I want to be direct about that because guilt loves to frame growth as betrayal. The move is honesty. Tell your starting guild the truth that you out-level the content you used to grind together and see who's willing to level up out alongside you and whose content staying exactly where they are. Some will level up, some won't. And that's not a moral failure on their part. It's just a different choice about their own path. Either way, staying permanently under level just to keep an old guild comfortable isn't loyalty. It's you refusing to become the final boss you already declared yourself to be, right? And here's the twist. Dun, 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 dun. Here's the twist, right? Final bosses never see coming until they're standing in it. Sometimes the raid you built for now doesn't have a guild yet. You've out-leveled the old one and the new one hasn't fully formed around you. That in-between stretch feels like failure, like you made a mistake leveling or leaving the comfort of your old crew for nothing. It isn't nothing. It's the exact gap every player who's ever leveled past their starting zone has had to cross along the way before the next guild found them. Don't mistake that gap for proof you should have left. The gap is the toll, not the verdict, right? Now, you stay in the gap long enough and you will start meeting other players crossing the exact same stretch of empty terrain, each of them having out-leveled their own starter guild around the same point you did. That's actually where the next formation actually gets built, right? Not inside a guild that was already assembled and waiting, but out of people who all left something behind at roughly the same time for roughly the same reason, right? Oh, you play Roblox? Okay. All right. Yep, that's it, man. You hit it on the nose. That's exactly what I'm talking about, right? And I need to draw a hard line before I continue, right? Because this entire episode collapses without this line drawn, right? And I've watched people misuse the idea of outgrowing a room as cover for genuinely cowardly behavior, right? To you cowards out there, we see you. We see what you're doing, right? Outgrowing a room and abandoning a room are not the same act, even though from a distance they can look identical. Outgrowing is what happens when you've done the work and had the honest conversation, giving the room a real chance to stretch and discover structurally that it can't hold you or to what you've become. Abandoning is what happens when things get hard, uncomfortable, unglamorous, and you dress up your exit as growth because outgrowing it sounds a lot better than I got scared and I left, right? And here's the test I want to use on myself, right? Listen, here's the test. I want you running before you walk out of anything, right? Did you actually give the room the information it needed to grow with you? Or did you just quietly decide it couldn't and left without ever finding out? Most people skip that step entirely. I've played with guys, man, and instead of them wanting to continue, they just quit. Next thing you know, they're playing a new game. They quit, right? It happens, right? That's the cowardly way, man. That's the cowardly way, right? They privately just conclude a relationship or a room has maxed out and they never actually test the conclusion by bringing their real declarations into the room and seeing what happens, right? That's not outgrowing. That's assuming and then using assumption as permission to disappear. I see it all the time, right? A second test. Are you leaving towards something, right? Or just away from something? Outgrowing has a direction. It's headed somewhere the old room genuinely couldn't take you. Abandoning usually doesn't have a destination. It's just relief at the absence of friction. If you can't name what you've growing into, be suspicious of the story you're telling yourself about why you're leaving, right? And here's why distinction matters so much for my Final Boss family specifically. Because this community, this show, has given people permission to declare bigger things about themselves than they used to allow. That's the whole point of the art. But permission to grow is not the same as permission to build the moment anything asks something else of you. Some of the rooms you've tempted to leave right now aren't actually too small for you. You just haven't done the harder work of bringing your full self into them yet, right? Test that out before you walk. If the test, or I should say, if you test it honestly and the room still can't hold you, then walk with a clear conscience. But walk because you tested it, not because leaving felt easier than trying, right? And then there's a third test, right? That's worth adding here, right? And this one I use when the first two don't give me a clean answer, right? Would you be willing to explain your exit in full, right? Knife hand. Honest detail to the person you're leaving and stand behind every word of it. If the honest explanation would embarrass you, if it's really about comfortable ease dressed up in the growth language, that's abandonment wearing an outgrowing uniform. If the honest explanation is one you'll be proud to say to their face, direction and all, that's the real thing. And you owe them that conversation before you owe them your absence, right? Now, look, go run all three tests. Run all three tests together, and you'll rarely be confused for long about which category you're actually standing in. The information test, the direction test, and the willingness to explain test. Look, confusion usually means you haven't actually done the test yet. You've just felt the discomfort and started building to a story to justify which other direction feels easiest in that moment, right? Yeah, man, add me on YouTube, bro. Find me. I'm the Final Boss. I'm out there, right? Look, and let's speak to my motivators. To my motivators, right? Let me get hyped up, man. You know what? You know what, man? For my motivators, because I love my motivators the way I love my motivators. Look, we're going to pull up the fired up train for my motivators, right? Listen, my motivators, this one's specifically for you because your gift for finding the bright side can sometimes talk you out of feeling something you actually need to feel. Outgrowing your room, even when it's genuinely the right move, comes with real grief attached to it, right? I need you to stop skipping past that grief with a quick reframe and positive quote. Everything happens for a reason. Stop that. And you're just making room for what's meant for you. Stop that too. Because all those, sometimes those things are true, but are they true enough as far as they go, right? But if you deploy them too fast, right, on yourself or someone else going through this, you rob the loss of the weight it actually deserves. Growth doesn't cancel grief. It runs directly alongside it, and pretending otherwise doesn't make you more motivated. It just makes you less honest, right? Yeah, you add me, bro. I add you back. That's what we doing here, man. You um 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 that yeah, man. Give me a second. I'll post it in a second, right? And here's what I want my motivators to understand about this specific kind of loss, right? It's disenfranchised grief. And that's a term for grief nobody around you validated because on paper, nothing bad has happened. You didn't lose someone to death. You didn't get fired. You made a good, healthy, forward moving decision to grow past the room that couldn't hold you anymore. And you still feel the loss in your chest like somebody died because, in a real sense, something did. The version of the relationship that existed inside that old room is gone, even if the person is still in your life in some other form, right? Now, motivating someone through this moment, including motivating yourself, means naming the grief specifically inside of rushing past it toward the silver lining. Don't tell someone it's for the best as the first thing out your mouth. Tell them this is going to hurt and it's allowed to hurt and it doesn't make the decision wrong. That's motivation with room in it for the truth. Inside of motivation that quietly punishes people for feeling sad about a good decision. Here's your practice for this week. The next time you catch yourself grieving a room you've outgrown, whether it's a friend group, an old-fashioned or old version of a business relationship, or a community that couldn't stretch to hold your current declarations, don't motivate yourself out of grief. Sit in it for exactly as long as it takes to be honest, and then you keep moving, right? Find the Boss Nation needs motivators who can hold both truths at once, that the growth was right and that it still costs something real. I also want motivators watching for this in other people, not just yourselves, right? Because somebody in your circle is grieving a room they outgrew right now, and a well-meaning crowd around them is almost certainly rushing them toward the bright side before they've even had 30 seconds to actually feel the loss. Be the person who slows that down instead of speeding it up. And what they miss about the old room before you ask what they're excited about in the new one, that order matters more than people realize. And getting it backward is how good decisions get remembered as painful ones instead of proud ones. This is also where your gift does not, well, I should say does not, how your gift does the most important work. Not in celebration after the growth, but in the quiet stretch right before someone's brave enough to admit they've outgrown something they still love. Sit with them there, right? Don't rush them toward the version of the story that sounds better in caption, right? Now, I've spent the majority of this episode talking about outgrowing rooms. And I want to connect it directly to where this entire brand is standing in right now, because this isn't just personal, it's structural, right? We are 8 episodes from the close of this arc 5, right? Arc 5, the declaration. 8 episodes from episode 300, right? 8 episodes from season 5, the harvest, which will be opening its doors very soon. I told you the entire arc, all arc long, that what's coming is not a continuation of what exists right now. It's a genuine transformation. And I haven't told you exactly what that means because some doors only open when you actually reach them, right? What I can tell you tonight directly is this: a harvest cannot be gathered in the same room the seeds were planted in. Different season, different ground, different structure entirely. That means some of what has carried this brand through season 4 is not walking through the door with us in its current form. I'm not talking about you, my Final Boss family. I need to be clear about that part, right? This community is the soil, not the room. The soil is exactly what travels with us at Harvest. I'm talking about formats, structures, and maybe even entire pieces of how this show operates that were seized perfectly for Rebirth and are already showing the same signs of tightness we've spent the entire episode naming. If a structure can't stretch to hold what's coming, it doesn't get dragged forward out of nostalgia. It gets stamped and it gets left in the season that built it, right? And I know some of you are going to feel the shift when it happens. The same way I felt every room I've had to outgrow across the entire episode, right? That discomfort doesn't mean something went wrong. It means the harvest is actually real, and the real harvest always require you to leave the smaller structure of the planning season behind. If nothing about season 5 makes you the slightest bit uneasy, that's usually a sign the season isn't actually big enough to be worth calling a harvest in the first place, right? And here's what I need from you between now and episode 300. Start doing your own version of tonight's audit, right? Which rooms in your life are already showing the tightness we've talked about this entire episode? Which formations were built for a mission that's already complete? You don't have to act on it all right away before episode 300, but I need you walking into the harvest with your eyes open instead of surprised when the ground underneath this ground, maybe underneath your own life, turns out to be different than the ground you planted it in, right? And I want to say one more thing about the word harvest and harvest itself, right? Because I chose it deliberately for season 5. And tonight is the first time I've explained why in much detail. A harvest doesn't happen in the same field the seed was planted in by accident. It happens there because there's where the growing occurred. But when the harvest is actually gathered, the field looks nothing like it did on the planting day. The fence lines change, the equipment changes. Sometimes the entire layout of the farm changes to handle the yield of a good season that that was actually produced, right? If season 5 doesn't require some real structural change from all of us, it was never a harvest worth having in the first place, right? Now, let's bring the communities back together for the close, right? Because outgrowing a room takes all 4 pillars working at once, not just one of them operating alone, right? So my smarts, run the audit and tell the truth about what data actually shows. My motivators, name the grief instead of skipping past it toward premature positivity. My warriors, assess the terrain honestly and build the next formation instead of forcing the old one into new ground. And my final bosses, accept the out leveling at a starting guild is portrayal. It's just what leveling up actually looks like from the inside. Miss any one of these and the process breaks. Audit without warrior courage just produces a list of rooms you privately resent but never actually leave. Warrior courage without motivated grief produces a cold transactional exit that hurts people unnecessarily. You need all 4 together instead inside the same decision, right? Now think about the room you named back earlier when we was first talking about this, right? The one where you've been quietly shrinking your own declarations to keep from disturbing anybody. Run it through 4 lenses right now. What does the strategist in you need to honestly audit about whether this room can actually stretch? What does the motivator in you need to grieve instead of bypass, whether you stay or go, right? Then what does the warrior in you need to assess about the current terrain versus the terrain this room was built for? What does the final boss in you need to accept about having out-leveled content that used to be hard for both of you, right? And I'll tell you honestly, which of these four is hardest for me personally, right? I'm gonna say it right now, live, right here on this mic, in this chair, right? It's the motivator lens, right? That's why I fired up the fired up train. My instinct, once I've made a decision, is to move, execute, and to not look back. And that instinct has cost me something of the grieving I should have actually sat inside before charging it to the next chapter and moving on. I'm working on that specifically this season, right? We're on this journey together. Nobody's perfect. We're all works in progress, right? Slowing down enough to feel the loss of a room even after I've already correctly decided to leave it. Knowing your weakest lens isn't weakness. Pretending you don't have one is. We all have weaknesses, right? Stop pretending that you don't. And here's your homework heading toward the close of this episode. I need you to pick one room you named from earlier, right? And don't announce anything to anybody. Just run the 4-lens audit honestly, on paper or in your head, however you choose, and get clear on what it's actually telling you. That clarity, not a dramatic exit, right? Not a public announcement, is the real work this episode was built on to start with from the beginning, right? And one last note before we move on, right? These 4 lenses don't just apply to the rooms you're tempted to leave. They apply to the rooms you're tempted to leave too fast, out of impatience instead of genuine outgrowing. Run the audit honestly, both directions. Some of what feels tight right now might just need one real conversation, one honest declaration brought into the room at full volume before you know for certain whether it can stretch or not. Give the audit the same respect that either direction it points to. It's not there to confirm what you already wanted to do before you started thinking about it. It's there to tell you the truth, even when the truth is that the room was never the problem, your silence was. Hey, Cove, I got you, man. Stick around. I got you. Give me a second. I got you. I haven't forgotten. Let me get through these communities first, man. But I got you. I'm going to take care of you. Look, as we approach closing, give me 5 more minutes, right? I want to leave you sitting with something unresolved, the same way this arc has operated from the beginning. Right? I told you 7 episodes ago, right? At the top of this episode, that the room this brand is standing in right now is not a room it will be standing in when the harvest opens at episode 300, right? And I'm not going to tell you tonight exactly which structures are getting left behind, but some of you are going to spend this week trying to guess. So go ahead and guess and drop it in the chat, right? Drop it in the chat. Some of you, especially my sharpest smarts, are closer to seeing the shape of it than you think. If you go back through this arc and pay attention, not just to what I said, but to which formats, which segments, which pieces of the show have felt slightly tight for a few episodes now, the same tightness we spent the entire hour learning to recognize in our own lenses, right? In our own lives. And here's the loop I actually want you carrying into next Sunday. If a structure this big, an entire podcast brand has to outgrow parts of its own architecture to reach the next season, what does that tell you about the size of the thing that's actually coming? I'm not going to answer that directly, but, right, I want you sitting with the question itself. I want to see you have the same discomfort, the same unresolved tension I've been asking you to sit with in every room you've named, right? And I'll say one more thing and leave it there. Discipline, right? Discipline. For me, across this entire arc, has meant saying and staying quiet about specifics that would be easier for me or more exciting for me to reveal earlier, right? That discipline has its own cost. The same kind of cost we've talked about all season. And I pay it every week. I choose not to answer the questions some of you keep asking me directly in the comments. I'm not going to break that discipline tonight either, right? Listen, you want to hear something funny? I have 4 books written, completed, done before this year began. But you're just now seeing it. The second book is out now. Books 3 and 4 will come out early next year. Already done, right? Already done. And I haven't said much about them. That's discipline, right? When I tell you this, right, that the ground on the other side of 300 is being prepared right now in real time by exactly the kind of quiet work this entire episode has been asking you to do to your own life. You gotta be quiet on them things, man. You want to see it happen? You want to see it come on to fruition? Shh. Stop talking so much, right? 7 Sundays left. I should say 8, right? No, 7. Yeah, 7 Sundays left, right? Listen to the rest of them the way I asked you to listen to the last stretch of declaration. Not just for motivation, but for the shape of what's actually being built underneath the words. I know some of you are already drafting comments trying to get me to slip a detail early, right? I understand the instinct, and I'm not going to take the bait. I won't never take the bait. Not because I don't trust you, but because part of what the whole episode has been about is respecting the season and the thing that we're actually in, right? This brand is still in the growing season. The harvest season isn't here yet. And pulling something out of the ground before it's ready doesn't make it more real. It makes it smaller than it is always going to be. So ask away anyway, if you need to. I'd rather fill the question and hold the line than have you sit in silence assuming. I've forgotten what you're waiting on, right? I haven't forgotten. I haven't, right? Some things just aren't ready to be said out loud. And some, the same way, some of your own declarations aren't either, right? Because you're not ready to make those declarations, right? And that's not failure. It's timing. And timing deserves the same respect we've been asking all of you to give every single show, every part of every process, right? We've been asking you that. Now, let's get to some logistics before we close. Because everything we covered tonight only means something if you're actually here to receive it, right? In real time. And not stumbling into the replay days later. We're talking about right now. Sitting Down Sundays airs live every single Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern time, not your assumed time zone. So if you're anywhere west of that, do the math now before the show starts. Not while you're already 5 minutes behind and trying to catch up on a conversation about rooms you've outgrown while missing the room you're currently sitting in. The same standard holds across all 5 shows this week. Motivation Mondays, Tech Tuesdays with Sensei, Merger Wednesdays, Special Guest Thursdays, and then back around here to Sitting Down Sundays, right? Same time every single night. We air 9 p.m. Eastern time. Lock it in the way you lock in the commitment that actually matters to you, right? And here's why being live matters specifically to tonight's episode or tonight's topic. This entire episode was about the rooms that fit that fit you in the rooms that don't fit anymore. This room, this chat, this live chat, I should say, the community showing up together every Sunday at 9 p.m. is one I've watched grow and stretched alongside this brand across all 4 seasons. It hasn't needed to be outgrown the same way of the structures I mentioned earlier. That's not an accident. It's because this room has consistently made space for bigger declarations instead of asking me to shrink them down to fit. That's rare, and I don't take it for granted, right? If you can't be here live for a given Sunday, catch the replay. I'm not going to guilt you for having a full life outside of this podcast that will contradict everything I just spent an hour telling you about honoring your own growth and your own seasons. But I want, live to be your standard, not your exception, especially heading into these final 7 episodes before season 5 opens its doors. Some of what gets said in these last few Sundays is going to matter more in hindsight than it feels like in the moment. And I'd rather you catch it in real time than piece it together later on from clips, right? 7 Sundays to episode 300. No, I'm sorry, not 7 Sundays. I'm tripping. 7 days. 7 days, man. 8 days. 8 days. Something like that, right? Here, it would be here, right? And for many of you, try to watch them live as possible as you can. I told you, 9 p.m. Eastern time, we're here. This room is worth showing up for. And I don't say that about every room, right? And that bring somebody. Bring somebody with you, man. Bring somebody with you this week. If tonight's episode named a room in their life you've been too afraid to look at honestly, this is exactly the kind of conversation that lands differently live together than it does secondhand through a clip 3 days later. Sit with them at 9 p.m. Eastern time and let the episode do some of the harder talking for you both, right? That's the whole reason this show exists in this format, live, unedited, at a set time every single week. Growth conversations happen better in real time and real reactions than they do in a polished clip, stripped of the pause before someone finally says the hard thing out loud. Bring the person. Let the room do what rooms are actually supposed to do. Hold 2 people through something honest in real time, whether either of them having to perform it for a camera afterward, right? Now, let's close. I read your message, man. Do I look Mexican to you? And no, Jake Paul can't beat me. Send a message, man. Email him. I'll see him in the ring. Look, before I let you guys go, and thank you for staying, here's where I need you to find everything we covered, right? And where to keep building alongside this brand, right? And we count down to the harvest. I need you to follow the Final Boss podcast everywhere content lives at the Final Boss _podcast. And follow me directly, either at Dwight Turbodillard or Turbo the CEO. This is where I post between episodes on exactly the kind of thing we talked about tonight. Growth that costs you rooms used to love. If tonight's episode names something you've been avoiding, go back through this arc and listen to the tightness I described in this segment, right? The places where a structure has felt slightly too small for a few episodes running, there's a pattern in there worth finding on your own. If you're in the middle of your own version of outgrowing a professional room, a career, an old business structure, an industry that hasn't kept pace with where you are headed, listen, the things I've done is proof that walking away from a room that served you well for decades can lead somewhere bigger. I built the company, Service Disabled Veteran owned, from after outgrowing what I outgrew. And I don't regret a single room I had to leave to get here. If you want the long form version of tonight's message, The Go Time series carries this exact theme across much bigger canvas than this hour alone, right? And so for my motivators and my final bosses who want the deeper research behind why outgrowing old structures is documented part of how identity and community actually work, that thread gets picked up in more academic depth on Merger Wednesdays, where I hold this content to a different standard of citation and rigor than Sunday's reflective tone allows. And for my warriors, know that everything I told you about formation and terrain tonight came from 23 years of living it. OEF 3, OEF 4, OIF, and at the Pentagon, not from a book about leadership theory. That's the receipt behind tonight's message. We are 7 days or 7 episodes, I should say, from episode 300. Season 5, The Harvest, is coming, and some of what carried us through the rebirth is walking through the door in its current form, and that's not lost. That's what a real harvest actually requires. Carry with you this week, not as an anxiety, but as clarity. You now have the language for something you've probably felt for months without a name for it. Go use it, right? Use the words. Use your words, right? Final Boss family, that's the room. Go be honest about which ones in your life still fit and which ones you're simply been too loyal to leave. One more thing before I go. If tonight named the room you're not ready to leave yet, that's allowed too. Not everything has to be decided this week. What I need from you is not a leap. It's honesty about which rooms in your life you've stopped bringing your full self to. Start there. The rest of the work will tell you what it needs in its own time, the same way growth always has, right? 7 episodes away from the end of the season. Neither of us can fully see the shape of it. Whatever room you're sitting in, when you hear this, make sure it's one you're actually bringing yourself into fully. That's the only test that's ever mattered tonight. And this arc, the declaration in every season, this brand has still got coming. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Final Boss Podcast. I am the Final Boss. This is Sitting Down Sundays, episode number 292. We are 8 episodes away from 300. There is a heavy pain that comes with discipline, but there's even a heavy pain that comes with regret. I am here. We are here. Be balanced, be equal, and be smart. And if I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. That is our show, ladies and gentlemen. That is our show. Let me get Cole Boy that information because he's been asking for it. Let me give him that information before we close. I got to open up another screen real quick. Maybe that was a bad idea. Where's it at? Cold boy, here we go, bro. Follow me and I'll follow back. Boom. There it is. All right. That's our show. I see you guys again tomorrow for Motivation Mondays. Talk to you soon. Y'all have a great one. Hey, Cold boy, I need you back over here tomorrow, bro. I see you then. Y'all have a great night.